So Whitney, you may not believe this, but I once was hanging out with our guests recently, and I feel like I'm going to inflate it by maybe 2 to 5 hours. But I feel like we had a 3-hour conversation about how I don't like going to like, I don't even remember the name of the sessions. What you would call
open
a coffee.
Spaces.
There you go, an open space.
You don't like an open space.
And I'm not sure. Now, obviously, it wasn't a competition, but I'm not sure who won. In that I was not very helpful at being helped. I kept on coming up with excuses and reasons and explanations. And I was thinking, we're going to be talking with Sasha here today, and I should update her on my position on, the see, it's even blocked like in Harry Potter, whatever
Open
the name
spaces.
the open spaces. And I'm not really sure if even what my position is. Why, the conversation was, why don't you like going to open spaces? And it kicked off because we were having some beer at DevOps-y's Amsterdam or drinks or whatever. And I just casually said, like, I don't like open spaces. And I think 5 minutes later.
Does it make you feel vulnerable, Coté, that anything could happen and you might not be planned for it?
Well, now that was a discussion point, and I have to admit, I don't remember where we resolved with that because there was.
That's not the question. How do you feel about it? Is the question.
Maybe Sasha can jump in. And
yeah, Sasha, please.
Yes, I can jump in. So, I will tell you what I remember. So, first of all, you were doing a great job being open and investigative about your own, affinity towards something. But what surprised me is that you like being on stage, and usually people who like being on stage also like being in a conversation, right? But free-flowing conversation. You also like podcasts, which are also kind of similar to open spaces. If I remember correctly, you feel like you have to be leading the conversation. And because open space is such an open concept, it's an uncomfortable situation where you might be not prepared, or it might go to wrong direction, or it's also not always appreciated when someone leads the conversation. In fact, I had sort of similar conversation with Paul, and turns out he feels the same way. And he also doesn't really like being in that position. Whereas if I go to an open space and I feel like I'm not interested in the conversation, I can feel very free to leave or just not be contributing.
One of you please say what an open space is for those who are listening who might not know?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this is a very important idea to DevOps Days, which is why we do them a lot. We talk about them a lot. And DevOps Days is a particular kind of conference, but one of the things that was sort of required in the, if you have a DevOps Days, you must do these things, was having sessions named open spaces. And what this means is you propose a topic and people basically vote if they want to show up to talk about it. And then whoever shows up, and the conversation goes whichever way it needs to go. And there's no objective leader. There's no objective, no one's lecturing. You just have a conversation that may end up in any direction. It's a really, really good way to learn about things and kind of get a temperature for certain conversations, across different organizations in the industry. So these are really nice, but definitely we've through the years we did discover that not everybody likes them. So
I can see. Yeah, someone with social anxiety, the fact that there aren't super strict social rules going into it, it could be anything, and you have to read a lot of social cues to figure out how best to fit in. I could see how that piece of it would be stressful.
Because it's not a fishbowl. It's not. Usually we try to send someone at least one experienced person, so they could kind of rescue the situation if something goes terribly wrong. But there's a couple of things that could happen. People could show up and not say anything, or someone could sort of forcefully lead and just sort of become this person who talks over everybody. Not everybody's comfortable. I think over the years at DevOps Chicago, we discovered that about 30% of people don't like open spaces because they would leave and they would fill out the survey and just say we're not interested. So we started having 1 or 2 smaller room sessions so that these people could go to a talk and learn something instead of just leaving the conference.
That's nice. During an open session, is it socially acceptable to lurk, to like watch everybody talk but not speak? Or is there pressure on you to speak?
No, so you're absolutely fine to be quiet the whole time. And also one of the laws of open spaces is that you can leave at any time. So if this is not working for you for whatever reason, or you just wanted to check out another room, because usually there's 4 or 5 of them happening at the same time in different rooms, like there's you can just get up and walk away, and no one should feel offended that you left.
Well, that's a good refresher, because I totally had forgotten that the point that I was making and that you're saying your husband Paul makes is like, I feel like I'm going to take over the conversation, which sounds a little like hubristic, but it's more of like, and it was interesting. Now I'm replaying in my head this whole chain of thoughts that I had after that. But like I have because I'm always very conscious of that in my workplace meetings and conversations. And it's often there's also a source of frustration where there's all this like this corporate meeting going on. And I always want to be like, we just need to write the blog, or, like there's all this talk, and it's hard for me to sometimes just do whatever it is you're supposed to do to like collaborate and like walk people towards something. So I'm not really sure how to resolve that, but so far it's turned out fine. I
think it turned out fine for you. I think I have 2 modes. I have I will lead the whole conversation and push everybody to the direction that I want, and I will just sit back and kind of listen. I kind of don't have.
I identify as being a reluctant leader. If no one's leading, I'll do it, but it's not my go-to state. Will you tell me about who you are and what you do?
That's an intimidating question. No, I'm Sasha. You pronounce my last name Czarkowski, despite the way it's spelled. So, I'm confusing people on the internet. I used to go by Sasha Rosenbaum, so that's how people might know me. So I decided to, perpetually confuse everybody who was ever searching for me. And I lived in multiple countries. I have basically my entire career been in software development and sort of DevOps related stuff. And I've been in tech for, I think, over 20 years now. I don't know.
Wow.
It's hard to count. And yeah, I have a small business, and we're consulting people on how to improve their IT operations. It's the first time I have my own business, and it's kind of a very different situation than working for large companies, which I've done for the previous 10 years. So it's been fun.
So the consulting about how to improve IT operations sounds like a super duper huge umbrella. Like, are you consulting tools? Are you doing like organizational reform, like sociotechnical?
Yeah. So sociotechnical is the key word. So we mostly talk to people about how to improve their humans working with technology. So a lot of times people, like, tools are easy, right? Tools either work or don't. And then people are difficult, and it's difficult to make processes better, especially at an organizational scale. And a lot of times, like, people think they need more tools. Like, basically the reason we started business because we were kind of tired of selling people software, because it's like, for 10 years I would walk into a conversation and be like, you buy this and it will solve all of your problems. And then they kind of never did solve all of the problems, did it? So I'm like, can we do better? Can we do something better for folks in IT?
Yeah. This software isn't going to get rid of Steve's ego. Yeah,
but it's rarely an ego. Like, I think there's much more problems with, like, sort of learned helplessness and that kind of thing, and kind of the lack of communication across the organization, or lack of prioritization across the organization, or like processes being calcified to where everything takes very, very long when it shouldn't. That rather than, someone being a bad apple. And that happens too, I think, but, luckily not as much.
What will you describe the learned helplessness phrase you just said?
Yeah, so I think the original study was from dogs, and they put dogs in cages and electrocuted them. And some cages were open and some cages were closed. And the dogs who were in closed cages stopped trying to escape. And then you open the cage and they still don't try to
Yes.
escape. So that's the term was coined as learned helplessness, and it basically means that once you try an action for a number of times and it never works for you, you just stop trying, even though like you might no longer be in cage, you might have agency. You don't realize it because you're not trying.
I can relate to that from a dating perspective.
Well, sort of. There's no segue from dating perspective. I was going to say from a corporate something. Anyways, I was at a conference in Bucharest a couple of weeks ago, and I saw that the former CEO of Porsche was speaking about something, and now I was like, I got to go see what the former CEO of Porsche is doing at this weird little tech conference, right? Where I'm speaking on the DevOps stage. And it was this guy, Kevin Gaskill. And like, I'm sure we've all seen former CEOs talking about things, and especially when they talk about how they've gone on an Arctic expedition with their son and sailed across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat. I'm like, oh man, what's going on here? But I kept watching, and he he pulled off the magic trick of these kind of talks where he, like at the end, I was like, I can go do it. Like I was inspired to like change the way things are going. And so I want to walk through, I think, the basics of his things and kind of like run it by you and see like what's going on with it. Cause it seems so simple. Like, so first of all, he gets called into Porsche, which is like the bottom of market leadership or whatever. Right. And he basically his one cool trick is you basically first, and he kind of says this really quick, first you get rid of half of the people. Now moving on. I mean, I'm making fun of that part, but it was said much more artfully, like you've got to go ask people, like, do you want to be involved here? What do you want to do? We're going to go through some hard things or whatever. But then once you get past that, you've kind of gotten rid of the people. Most of the people know actually what they should do to improve. And they're always telling you what's holding them back. And so you've just got to go to them and have them, remove these barriers for what's holding them back. And then also, be inspiring. And there was that whole, I forget the name of this kind of thing, but you remember when it was a big management consulting revelation that like UPS doesn't actually deliver packages. They deliver dreams, or like, that kind of like that kind of talking. So, like Porsche isn't about just a car. It's about like this lifestyle and this thing that you have. And so we had to think about what were our customers buying, not just a car, but a blah, blah, blah. Right. And, it was basically that kind of school of stuff. But at the end, like it did seem like a new thing that he had kind of introduced. And by new, I mean, it's not just the same old, like Dale Carnegie wrote it however long ago. It was like people actually know what they should be doing. So the executive should just go like, yeah, what should we be doing? Let's write down all 50 of them and we'll pick the top 5 and do those things. I mean, is that is old Kevin Gaskill onto something, or is that just a kind of like paint by numbers thing?
As a consultant, I think a lot of times I walk in and like when I start having conversations with people know it hurts, right? And people pretty much have ideas on how to fix it. And if you let them fix it, they would. But it's like, there's a disconnect. So like you walk in and like people at the top are usually invested in something that's like the market shiny thing. So it's like developer productivity, or we need to push code faster, or like whatever. And I'm like, once you start having conversations with them, it's like, you do not need to push code faster. Like that is not your problem. Like you have problems. That is not one of them. And I think, it's easy to go after what's easy, and it's easy to sort of like, we bought this new platform, so therefore everything's going to work now, or we, measured this DORA metric, therefore everything's going to be good now. I think it's hard to actually listen to people, and it's hard for executives it's hard for people on the ground to know how what they're doing is connected to what executives are thinking.
Yeah, and maybe I mean you said something that I guess is the thing that that clunks in my head is how do you actually listen to that and do something with it? Listen to the like, here's how we need to improve and do things and prioritize it, and then you know, I'm also now remembering the other I say this jokingly, technology that he introduced. We've seen this many times, was the wall full of sticky notes. And you know, kind of using that as a way to list things out and prioritize it. And I don't know, that was about it. I guess maybe to answer my own sort of quandary, maybe what he would have said is like, the way you listen to them is you listen to them, or some sort of I don't know if that's Sun Tzu or Buddha, but you know, like.
Well, so I think, and you've seen me do the learning talk, and my biggest pet peeve is that people don't know that they don't know how to learn. Right. And like, especially organizations don't know that they don't know how to learn. And anyway, but one of the problems with executives listening is that nobody tells them things. Like, it's not even that they're like, even humble executives that actually are intending to listen. The problem is people don't tell them what's going on. Andrew calls it watermelon reports, right? But like, it's all, you know, red inside, but it's all green on the outside. That's your report. That's how it tends to look. And
so do people not tell them because they don't feel safe to tell them, or is there another reason?
So we all defer to authority, right? Like this is automatic and also cultural, and we're like this is ingrained in us in every situation. And so what happens is, let's say a big executive says, we're doing this project X, right? This is the North Star, we're going there. And then it goes down, gets propagated to people on the ground, and someone on the ground goes like, we absolutely cannot do this. Like, here's the 5 obstacles. Like, we don't have the tools, we don't have the people, we don't have the market, whatever. Can't do it. Maybe I'm saying like very drastically, right? And then that person on the ground reports it to their manager, and the manager goes, lists the 5 problems, goes, well, you know, there's some challenges, we're looking into it. The next manager up the line goes, lists 2 challenges, goes, well, you know, there's a couple things, but people on the ground are trying to figure it out, whatever. By the time it gets back to the executive, there's a timeline and there's a promise and everything's fine, we're going that direction. And then what happens is the executive has no idea that there is a problem, right? Because no one ever told them. Or her. And the person on the ground goes, I clearly screamed at the top of my lungs that this is a problem, and literally no one paid attention to me, right? So that's your learned helplessness. Like, once you try to do this a number of times, you just give up because you're like, no one ever listens, right? So like that is super endemic. Like this happens, and you have to work really hard to correct it.
And how do you correct it? Like, as much as you can say in a podcast format, how do you begin to correct it?
So I think it begins with leadership. So like I mean, while you can do some things as a middle manager, like the leadership really matters, and you sort of having this culture of productive reasoning, right? And like actually making sure that your people know that it's safe to bring bad news, that like you actually want different opinions and like stuff like that. And then the stuff I like to preach is, I call it hypothesis-driven development because we're in software, but it doesn't have to be development per se. Think of the scientific method, right? So instead of an executive making a decision which direction we go, instead we set a hypothesis and we say, okay, we think, like, we're making widgets. We think that if we make green widgets, it's going to sell more, right?
Yeah.
But it's not like Sasha, the CEO, thinks that, because if Sasha, the CEO, says green widgets are the best, then everybody will give me data that proves that I'm correct. And right?
It's like the possibility of failure is wrapped into the idea that's coming from up top. So therefore, it's okay. Like, it's green lighted from the beginning, like, for it not to work.
Once you have a hypothesis, you're not failing. Like, if you make green widgets and actually sold less, you didn't fail. You learned, right? Therefore, you're going to make green widgets. Whereas if if it's someone's opinion invested in it, then like you failed. So therefore you have to sort of save face and make sure that nobody knows that there was a problem.
Yeah, I think like at least the way I'm thinking about what you're saying is instead of saying, CEO Sasha wants green widgets, CEO Sasha wants learning to happen. So whenever you like demonstrate that learning has happened, then you're using the instinct to always tell the boss things are going well. to say like, yes, we are doing the activities of learning. And of course, with anything, they could falsify is the wrong word, but you could be learning the wrong things. But at least you're rewarding behavior instead of a business outcome, which may not be exactly what you're going for.
Yeah, and a lot of companies, companies today sort of like do this, right? Like the big companies we think of, like, right, like they do A/B testing and they roll out a new feature to a tiny subset of users and they see how it does. Like all of this stuff is like essentially that, like the scientific method applied to what you ship. But it's funny because we're in this industry that some people are doing amazing things and some other people are like still doing run books on paper, and it's just like the disconnects are sometimes very, very, very wide.
I have a question about something you said earlier, which is that organizations don't know that they don't know how to learn. So that makes me wonder, if they don't know what that they even have the problem, what pain points are organizations experiencing that are causing them to reach out to you and your company? How do they find you?
I think you just kind of have to happen to have someone in leadership who is invested in learning or invested in improving the organization. And, sometimes it happens, and sometimes you go and give a talk at a conference and someone gets inspired because they saw something that connected the dots for them, I think it's a big problem in terms of learning, because like literally every organization on the planet has learning as one of their key values. But like when people have done actual research, like 80% of them don't actually no matter what scale, because there's different studies and different scales and different questionnaires, whatever. And no matter what scale you look at, most organizations are not learning organizations. So,
well, on the other side of that, being discovered, I mean, now that you're, let's see, as you say, have a small business, that's a consultancy. Like how's the marketing going? Like what have you learned that works? I mean, like, because you're marketing to, tell me if I'm wrong, but a pretty small set of people that seem to be difficult to get at. And yet here you are. It's been 2 years, I think. I forget.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So like what are you? Do you say ergonauts? I forget what you call.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. What are the ergonauts doing marketing wise to like get to the customers?
Yeah, I think we're mostly trying to be inspirational, and like our theory is that if you again connect enough dots for folks, then they will get inspired and sort of seek the enlightenment, right? I think this is it's interesting how often when I speak to people, I'm like, what I'm going for is you being like, oh, I never thought about this, right? Like that moment, and that moment is what kind of brings you to be like, oh, maybe I can improve my company, maybe I can improve my team, maybe I can improve how I'm doing work. So that to me is the best.
What's an example of something you might be teaching that makes a light bulb go off for people?
So like the learning talk is personally one of my favorites, right? And so like I talk about personal growth mindset, because organizational learning doesn't happen without individual learning. And then, how organizational learning is connected, but also how you need sort of both things. And then the other thing is like the very big sort of thing that I think people need to improve is measuring, like how they measure stuff. And there's so many things that go wrong with metrics. And like there is such a thing as having all the dashboards in the world and not knowing what's happening. There is such a thing as like metric overload, or like, lots of noise, no signal. There's also such thing as toxic metrics, right? Like you can very easily screw it up. And then a lot of times people just don't measure things that matter. So sort of going into that and figuring out how to set up metrics in a better way.
I've heard the phrase, whenever a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure.
Yeah, so that's Goodhart law, and that one of the things that is majorly wrong with metrics is, so if you have a single measure, I have a visual in my slide that came from Sketch. It's a website. They do excellent sketches for business concepts. But anyway, there's like, if you say you want a lot of nails, you may get thousands of really tiny nails that are useless. If you say you want big nails, you may get like ginormous nails that are useless. And it kind of becomes obvious that like, if you want good things, you need to at least measure the two things, right? I want a quantity, but also a like quality metric, right? And in development, this is also true, right? You kind of want to balance the metrics across the, like, so if you said, I only want velocity, you'll get velocity. Like you get so much velocity, that's amazing, right? And it will be partially because people sort of fake it, game the metric, but also partially because they drive towards what you're asking for, right? And so the best way to contradict that particular thing is to balance the metrics. Also, like Goodhart law is like very big in education. We keep measuring more and more things in education, and like actually teaching is becoming harder and harder, and results of education are becoming worse and worse.
So what is that? I mean, how would you, I feel like there's a phenomena associated with the Goodhart's metrics, et cetera thing, where we all know, I don't know who all is, but many of us know that if you have a metric and you work towards the metric, that's bad. But we all do it. Like it's kind of like why do we keep hating ourselves sort of situation? Like, I don't know. There's something strange about that. That
if nothing strange about that. If I tell you that your bonus depends on X, you're gonna do everything in your power to maximize X. Like that's exactly what happens. And
oh sure. I mean I guess more of the people who the telling person. Like it seems like the people doing the metrics would be more clever than to kind of like braid their own noose as far as what they're doing.
So you often, like what often happens is you have different departments that have different metrics that drive towards actually different outcomes. And then you have these clashes, like what is it about DevOps, right? Because ops are incentivized to keep the lights on, right? And keep things working and keep them from breaking. And dev is incentivized to drive fast and break things, right? And like you paying people to do a thing and they're doing everything they can to do the thing you're paying them for. Right. And this often happens across different departments, not just dev and ops, but like you have sales and marketing, you have some sort of like, even security, like you have people driving towards different incentives, and that creates different outcomes. I think for people setting the metrics, so first of all, like department heads, like your CMO might not be talking to your sales head of sales, right? Or your, COO might not be talking to whoever, like, I don't know, wherever ops lands in the business versus dev is not always the same metric. Also, we overdrive. I think, in my opinion, at the current market, we super overdrive developer productivity. And I think the Gen AI craze is not helping this. We're all talking about how to increase developer productivity, and it's almost like we're converging on this, like we're like measuring lines of code that people are like delivering, and like I don't know. I think
what's the consequence of overdriving on developer productivity?
I think a lot of times what I see is that operations in the sense that people like SRE or people running your software are suffering, right? Because like essentially what happens is developers are incentivized to push out features. They're not incentivized for those features to be really stable or working or whatever. And so they keep pushing stuff onto ops, like here's my stuff, run it now, right? No one, like there's no feedback loop in the opposite direction. So, you start seeing more incidents, you start seeing less reliability, you start seeing, and for organizations that don't consider themselves tech organizations, often they don't talk to customers. right? So there's no feedback loop from customers either. So they don't actually know if their software, like, does this new feature improve anything for anybody, or does it improve anything for enough people? Like, a lot of times people will end up with extremely customizable software that isn't really working for anyone, and everybody already forgot how to customize it and stuff like that. Like that, for instance, or like, I don't know, silly thing. I fly a lot, right? I use United mobile app all the time, and it's pretty well designed, like in the sense that it looks good, it works, it doesn't fail, but it does not do what I wanted. Like my first use case is show me like when is this flight, when does it leave, and when does it return? Like the times and the dates all on the same page. It is, you need to click like 5 times to get to a screen that displays that information. Like, no, but I want to know when I get back here. Like, like not just when I get on this particular plane, right? Like, I don't know, every time.
So it sounds like so many things can go wrong in so many places. Like, how do you begin to untangle that? Where do you start? Yeah,
so like from the beginning of DevOps days, right? Like, I feel like you start where it hurts the most, right? You try to figure out where people are spending time, people are unhappy. A lot of times people will not make a certain change because it's like, oh, like it doesn't matter. Like, well, like 30% of your support calls are about this. Like, again, you don't need to push code faster. You need to fix this problem that people like software keeps breaking for folks. So like find what hurts. And I'm a big fan of theory of constraints. I'm a big fan of sort of value stream mapping type approaches. So sort of like go to the gamble, like figure out what people are doing and what parts are not working for them.
So I want to have you vet that I can run around saying this because you were talking about developer productivity earlier, and I think I'm remembering like that. What you want to do is find the bottlenecks in your process, and how does the saying go? If you're not working on the bottlenecks, you're working on nothing or something, right? Like you're
wasting your time basically because you can't push faster. I think a lot of times what happens in development with new tools. So like, I think, you take it 10-ish years ago, right? When we didn't have CI/CD pipelines everywhere and like we didn't have good tools for sort of that part of the life cycle. And I think we improved a lot. Like I was a big believer that like, if I just help people, put code in source control and then build a pipeline that goes into some sort of staging environment, and then you can test it automatically as much as possible, like, and then you push to prod, like I think we're improving lives here, right? Like you introduce some sort of rollback procedure. Like these are all sort of really good things. I think where we settled is a lot of organizations have the CI/CD pipelines, but it's like no offense, but like it just pushes crap to production, right? Because like there's not necessarily checks and balances, right? There's not necessarily automated testing. There's not necessarily any kind of gated process for stuff. And so like it just and then again they still think that they need to push faster, right? Because like, oh, it takes 2 weeks to push and not 20 times a day or whatever. It's like 2 weeks is okay. Let's like look at what you're actually like. Have you talked to a customer in the last 2 years?
Well, that's interesting because that kind of adds to the next thing I was thinking is, it seems like we do have this industry obsession with developer productivity, and as always it depends on what you mean by that. But I'll just swim past the depends there and just say like, it seems like developers are pretty productive, right? Like they're very application developers generally work as fast as they can, if that makes sense. And so like getting an individual or even a team of developers to be more productive seems like a distraction from like finding these bottlenecks that exist further down to like getting a user to actually use it. And the delightful confounding is like the fun like sprinkles that you added to that idea is, well, what if you've removed bottlenecks and now your bottleneck is that you're pushing crap? right? Like,
Right.
and so like it's actually really fast to get things out. But there's this, I mean, I don't know if that's a bottleneck. You'd have to really work to call it a bottleneck, but there's something else that some other problem that you've now created that also isn't necessarily developer productivity. It's not operation stuff, but something is going wrong that like whatever you're putting out there is just not helping.
Right. So, I mean, it usually manifests itself in just some sort of customer satisfaction problems, and then in a lot of times in operations problems, right? So like, if you have, so the major shift that happened in our industry is we used to like put software on CDs and give it to people, right? So you would get a instance of Photoshop or something, whatever, and then you would install it in your computer and it'd be yours, and it would be your problem to run and configure it. Even if you worked for a big organization, you would get an Exchange server on a CD and you would install it, and that would be your problem, right? And then like, you would manage it for 1,000 people, right? So anywhere from one person to, I don't know, 5,000 people in an organization, maybe 100,000 if you're working for a giant corporation. But like now we're running SaaS at like such different levels, right? So like you no longer, like when you get Photoshop, it's now a SaaS product. And reliability of that product is no longer on you, it's on the person who's running the SaaS, right? So we're all essentially converted, like most of our software across the board converted into software as a service, but we haven't, I don't think, changed the approach. So like we have all the ideas, like we have the SRE book and it's really good, and we have like other stuff like that's coming out of different companies that like we've learned about how to operate software in the long term. But a lot of people are just like renaming teams. That's one of my favorite slides. I basically put it in every presentation. It's like we've renamed like support into sysadmin, into like ops, into DevOps, into SRE, into like, I don't know, we're going platform engineering now, right? Like whatever. And then like nothing changes. Like we like you talk to these people and a lot of times they're basically support. Like they're doing the same things they did when they were support, right? So like if you're not empowering people to be part of that feedback loop, and unfortunately, like a lot of times people kind of don't care about the personal experience of people in operations, right? Like saying, you work long weekends, tough luck. Like,
that's what you signed up for when you took this job,
right?
Yeah.
So I think this is one thing that I haven't found how to convince people of is like, how do I convince people that they should care about the operations experience, right? Because like everybody seems to be caring about, and again, I spent 10-ish years in development, right? I'm a developer, and I don't think developers need more catering and more improving their lives. And like, I think they're doing fine.
And that's because they're directly related to the value stream, and operations are not. Do you think that's why that disconnect is there?
I think because like new features are easy to justify. Like everybody wants new stuff, right?
Yeah.
Everybody wants new features. Everybody wants innovation. It's easy to get budget for. It's easy to say, rah, rah, we did a good thing. Also, the way organizations are budgeting, they're budgeting for projects. We're still budgeting for projects, right? Because again, we converted into software as a service, but how do you get money for developers? You say, I'm going to ship these new features. But do you need the new features? Like, one customer told us that if we did this, it would be better. Okay. Have you talked to any other customers? Is this customer 20% of your revenue? Maybe you should be shipping for that customer. I don't know. But like a lot of times it's easy to sell. But in the long run, anything you built, if it's successful, the operations budget exceeds the development budget, right? Because like, imagine if you're shipping software as a service, right? And like it is successful, which means people are using it long term. That means that 20 years from now, like I don't know, let's not go there. 5 years from now, you still want it to run. So like the features you ship today, you still want them to run 5 years from now. Now, you need maintenance, maybe you need to replace some new features, whatever, but your operational budgets should be matching that paradigm.
Absolutely. One thing this conversation has taught me is, like, I definitely have heard over and over again to ship quickly, like ship fast, but I'm now thinking about the assumption that we're making that like, or the specification we need to say is like ship quality software fast. It's not enough to ship fast.
Yeah, and maybe also we haven't updated that phrase since like 2005, and I don't know. Maybe we need to. Maybe we're shipping fine now.
We did it. Good job, everyone. Some confetti falls from the sky.
No, I agree, and it's also funny because I think one of my friends says like, we've improved the DevOps, so like now we need to go back to improving the dev. But like I disagree because like we didn't improve the DevOps. We improved the CI/CD, right? Like I mean maybe we have better on-call operations, like on-call apps and stuff. But like did we really improve operations? I'm not sure.
Like if improving dev is like dev experience, the speed and quality of software delivery, what does improving ops look like? Like what does success look like?
So I'm gonna contradict myself, but like after running DevOps-y for a bunch of years, I had this moment where I was like, oh God, like nothing's changing, right? We're having the exact same conversations every time. And every time there are people who are like mind blown. Oh my God, we've learned so much from this. And I'm like, God, at one point I went and I saw the original like Agile, not the manifesto, but one of his books. And like he listed principles. I'm like, this is continuous delivery. Like, and that's like 10 years before the continuous delivery book. I'm like, we keep rediscovering the same thing. What the hell? And then I was talking to my friends, like my co-organizers, and like, no, our lives improved. Like our lives got better because we used to be paid pretty low compared to developers, and we used to be treated like click monkeys, right? And now we like write software and we're appreciated and our salaries are better and we have a say and all that stuff. And that's cool. And I think that did happen, but in some organizations I still sort of discover that like operations is this like neglected part, right? And still like very much not operating according to like the principles. So I think where do you start is like, I think I would read the SRE book. Like it's good. And
free.
Success for operations is more like they have plenty of budget, they're well paid, they're well respected. Is that what success looks like?
So it's part of it, right? But I think also, so well respected is interesting. They have to be able to push back on developers, right? Like that's a core part, right? So like when a developer gives me an app, I should be able to say, look, this is poorly architected, it's unmaintainable. Right? To hold it together, I need to burn many, many hours, or to deploy it, I need to burn many, many hours. This is unacceptable. Go fix these 10 issues so it becomes maintainable and runnable, so that it's not my team, being awake in the middle of the weekend, but it's developers fixing it or, doing better architecture. That's a for instance on how we improved operations lives. And it is in the SRE book, right? Like there's the concept of production readiness review, and SRE can push back on dev and say, no, we're not going to run this. Whereas in most organizations that doesn't exist.
That's not a thing. Okay.
Well, so you lived through one of the bigger transformations of our, I think, our lifetimes, the transformation of the USSR, and you wrote about like this crazy get a small amount of cash out of your bank accounts when possible. I think you didn't even put it in air quotes, monetary reform. So that was just one thing, but I imagine, having lived through it yourself, like there's all sorts of interesting experiences you had, and like one thing I'm curious about in the context of transformation is like, let's say when you're living through a crazy transformation, like what do like individual groups of people do to like stay okay and sane? Like whether it's like a big giant company or a big giant country just going nuts, like how do you take care of each other despite what's going on externally?
Well, I think that like a lot of people, I'm like, you made me think about myself and what do I do in these situations. And so like, I think there's one option is flight. So you just run away from a bad thing. Like that's there's an option a lot of people are afraid to take, but I find it very valuable. Like if you're in a really bad situation, sometimes it's better to leave. Willis said that to me years ago, if you can't change your job, change your job. And I'm like, that's very smart.
The door of the electrocuted cage is open.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
In most cases, yeah. Every now and again you can't leave, but most cases you can. The other thing is like a lot of people are just like, nothing's happening. I'm just going to focus on this thing I can control, and I'm not going to worry about the other stuff. The other thing is like if you are in some sort of like leadership position, and it can be an IC or it can be middle management or whatever, you can create sort of psychologically safe environment as you can for your people. Like kind of, yes, you can't fix the entire organization, but you can try to be as good as possible. I mean, crazy transformations are hard because it's interesting because I've seen it kind of done both ways. I've seen it where like leadership doesn't share what's happening, and that's really difficult. But I've seen it also where leadership shares what's happening, but they change their mind because like situation changes and they change their mind every 10 minutes. And then like, you're like, that is also really, this is also a lot of uncertainty. I'm not sure I wanted all this stuff. Right. So, I mean, uncertainty is very difficult for people. Uncertainty is worse than bad news.
Is part of your role at like going into organizations and making these big changes, are you seen as the bad guy to some people, or you're the agent of change and big transformation, I imagine? And how does that feel, and how do people react to you?
I don't think I have had this reaction at all, like being seen as a bad guy. Because we try, like one of the things we do is we try to listen to people, and like it's amazing because it's amazing how much people tell you, right? Because no one ever listens to them, so they like eager to tell you, and they're like, can you please tell my manager's manager or whatever that like this is happening, like that, please. And I'm like, yep, I can't, like, not gonna quote you, not gonna, whatever, but like we can talk about this. So like I think we usually are seen as helpful, and we often, like, it's often comes that like we come in the middle of the transformation. We try to rescue the transformation that's already underway and is like perceived as failing or is actually failing, and we try to kind of find the bits that are actually good and focus on them and solve the bits that are not good.
I don't know if this is like me cultural, my group, or like Western cultural. But I'm almost, I don't know, let's say 90% certain that in that role you're talking about, where you're an outsider going in trying to help people, right? That you like have to start with some self-effacement of some type, right? Like I think, like in your learning talk, you kind of walk through this, like how I ended up watching Sex and the City instead of studying for finals, right? And and like I definitely trade in this sort of like, what a goofball I am, and like look at me. And even that Porsche CEO I was talking about, he kind of like in the way that someone would, he sort of like took some jabs at himself here and there. But I don't know if I've encountered effective change agents who are like, I know what I'm doing. I mean, I can't even say what they would say in a tone that doesn't sound dismissive, but like, I don't know. Do you think you have to like start by like bringing yourself down somehow?
Showing your humanity?
Yeah. So I think, interestingly, I think it's easier as a consultant than as a leader inside the organization, because like humility, leaders have this double bind where they're expected to lead, right? They're expected to know and, be sure and confident. Confidence is extremely important and to humans and whatever. And then you add this kind of expectation that you need to be, accept different opinions and stuff. And you kind of end up in this situation where it's difficult to navigate for a leader. I think for a consultant, it's much easier. I've always disliked the type of consulting where like someone walks in and like, all of your stuff sucks and we're going to make it all better. I feel much better when I come in and I'm like, oh, this is good and this is good and this is great and this really sucks and it's not your fault and let's dig into how we can do this.
On that topic of conference talks, since all three of us do this a lot, I've seen a lot of your talks and they're great. And when you're, let's see, first for yourself, and then maybe if we get to it, if you're advising other people, but like when you're doing a talk, when does it like pop into your head that I should break one of the rules of conference talks, like one of the taboos? Because it's gonna either because, well, first of all, when you do break one, like why do you do it? And then also how do you decide to tactically, not tactfully, but tactically do it?
What are the rules of conference talks? Yeah.
Well, for example, the number one rule that I break all the time is you're supposed to have your text readable on a slide. And so I usually am like, I'm going to have a slide where you can't read anything, right? That like, what do they even call it? An eye slide? There's some word that people use for that. And I don't know. There's also like, what are some other rules? Like, this is a good point.
Make eye contact. I
guess a big one would be you shouldn't have your back to the audience. I mean, like, there's all these things, and maybe that's also part of the question is like, I can't, as I'm demonstrating, I can't tell you what the rules are, but I know there's rules, right? Like there's things that you're supposed to do.
Well, so I think most of speaking advice sucks because if you like naively Google speaking advice, it will tell you like make eye contact with your audience, but not too much eye contact so you're not staring. Never look at your side. Never turn back to your audience. Don't put your hands in your pockets. Don't do this. Don't do that.
See, that's a good one.
That is awful because if you walked up on stage and tried to think about even 5% of these things, you would be absolutely terrible at presenting. Right. So my favorite book, if you ever wanted to read one, is Presence by Amy Cuddy. And she talks about basically being on message. So like what you want is sort of confidence and you want to be focused on your message and it doesn't like you can put your hands in your pockets and you can look down and you whatever. And as long as you're authentic and you care about what you're saying, people will relate to you and people will understand, will perceive you as the authenticity that you're displaying. So like I think the best thing to do for conference speaking, of course, is practice. But of course, not all of us. I do know excellent speakers that practice a lot. I myself fall into the speakers that don't practice a lot. Every time I think that I should and I don't. That part of the problem is I change my slides every time I look at them. So like I envy people who don't do that because you can like write a talk and then deliver it and then get really good at delivering it. But I'm like, no, I'm going to rewrite all the flow and like just do this.
You want to evolve it.
Other thing. Yeah. Every time. That's how it works. I don't know that I decide on purpose to break conference rules or speaking rules. I think they don't matter as much as people think.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Maybe I need to do more analysis of what the rules are because I feel one of them, for example, is like you should start with a story, which is good advice and people do that, but like I don't know, I often don't like talks that start with a story and I'm always kind of like pulling at for like, all right, when are we gonna get to the thing? What's the thing? Like what? How does like that one time that you made a pie relate to configuring servers? Let's get there.
Well, and I think I'm kind of tired of talks that are like what blah taught me about DevOps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. A lot of blah taught you about DevOps or whatever. I think. Oh no, you go. I totally lost my train of thought right now.
Oh, I wanted to ask Coté why he chooses to break the rule of not having too much text on a slide. I hate when there's too much text on a slide, Coté.
Yeah. Well, I'll get to answering your question, but that raises up another point I was interested in talking about, which is, we talked with someone from the CNCF, Katie Greenlee, last episode, which for us was yesterday, but for the listeners will have been 2 weeks ago. But anyhow, she offhandedly brought up the point that, part of management, one of the things that she would tell people is you should be brief in your emails, right? Like in your communication, which is certainly true. And that's also kind of a thing for conference talks, this like brevity and clearness. And I guess I really don't like those rules. like I've been on the receiving end of brevity so many times. Like I was complaining about, all you have to do is ask the employees what's wrong and then problem solved, next slide. And just like, whoa, we could talk for 3 hours about that. Or like, this single line email should have been a 5-page document, I guess, to put it another way. And so like, I'm always like, I don't always do it, but there's often times where I think like the one that I do it recurrently is like, I suggest you should have a developer survey, which has like 50 questions. And I like put the font size at 8 and put all 50 questions on the slide. And, there's a bit of a joke too, which is rhetorically fun, but it's also kind of like, maybe you would like to see what they all are, right? That it's not just like, here's 3 sample questions, but I don't know. So that's an example. Brevity often drives me nuts. Like I want to know there's a lot more detail that I could get to.
So I'll say, first of all, I do brief slides. My rule is 20 to 30 seconds a slide, but that I do this as much for the audience as I do this for myself, because if I have a slide that I talk to 10 minutes, I'm going to forget a point I was going to make. And it's much, much easier for me to just sort of 1 point per slide, and I can, go through 200 slides, who cares? But then on the part of brevity, I do believe in brevity, but it's more readability, skimmability, if you will.
Sure.
So like people don't read. We're all like, whether or not we're ADHD, we're like in the world full of distractions. So you give someone a 3-page document and they're just incapable of reading it, myself included. And so what it should have is the ability to quickly skim. So like, the proper headlines, the proper formatting, the proper bullet list somewhere. So like something that tells you where things are. So like if you don't go around it in order that someone created initially, it still works for you. And then I do think that how you write communication really matters, and like we should all kind of strive to be better at it, because like the goal of communication should be to a lot of times we just sort of focus on what we want to say rather than what people need to hear.
Yeah. No, that's true. And I do I have noticed that either the earlier in the morning or the later at night that I write corporate communications, the longer they are and the more I wish I had just emailed them to myself the next day. Like that I could have just concised things down, that I'm kind of seeking out free therapy, kind of as you were saying. A lot of communication is just talking to yourself by talking to other people. I perhaps that you're doing.
Well, a therapist would tell you to, email it to yourself, sleep on it, and email it tomorrow when you had the chance to. But Indeed. This is sometimes also a wash down advice, because sometimes you need to say something. And like, if you, again, follow all the rules all the time, you'd be an unhappy person.
Yes, indeed. Well, so the last question I had, you moved to Louisville recently. Mm-hmm. And I like what's been like an unexpected delight of the Louisville scene. Not that it countered your expectations, but that it was just like, oh, look at this. I had no idea.
Well, last week we actually went to Lights Under Louisville, which is like a Christmas display, and it's in this giant former mining cave. It's ginormous. Cool. It just like we drove through it for like 30 minutes. I don't know, and it's one of the best Christmas lights displays I've ever seen. Like, it's really, really cool. The zoo was also really cool. They had a polar bear and stuff. I've been to a lot of zoos and I was like, Louisville Zoo, whatever. But no, it was really cool. And every now and again, like, things delight me like that. Like, I'll discover a good restaurant, or I'll discover a good, I don't know, playground or something. And they'll be like, this is really cool. The thing I pine over, because I moved from Chicago, which has every restaurant imaginable to humans. Like, there's not as many restaurants, and there's not as many sort of like cuisines from all over the world type of thing. Yeah. So like finding a good Vietnamese in Mission Impossible or whatever. Why
Louisville?
We kind of wanted to change, and we like actually visited a couple of different states, and we came here, and like it just was nice and spoke to us, and like I definitely am enjoying myself. It's like this is very much like it's very different than a big city. I've kind of always lived in a bigger city, and this is quite a different experience in a good way.
Nice. I definitely have the urge to move to the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. So sometimes I look at, and listings for Cincinnati, Ohio, like what houses are for sale there. So it's cool that you did it.
A proper city. Yeah. And I mean, Louisville has like 1 million people in metro. I don't know if it's in the city or in the metro, but it definitely it feels small compared to Chicago, which I think Chicago is 9 million in metro, but like it feels 100 times smaller, not 10 times smaller. Like if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Well, so we've to close out, we've alluded to it several times, but tell people about your company. Like, what is it? Where is it? How could they look it up?
Yeah, so Ergonautic, which means navigating work, and you can look it up on the internet, or you can look for my name. It would be pretty easy to find. Also, Andrew Clay Schaefer and Jay Bloom are my co-founders. You might have heard of one or both of them. I think we're pretty easy to find on the internet. Gen AI can now tell you what we do, which is kind of cool. We've been indexed. So,
you made it.
Right?
Another question we've alluded a lot to, y'all keep saying the learning talk. What do you say when you mean that, and where can we find it?
So I've actually just given this talk a bunch, and it keeps evolving. I've been giving it for about 5 years. I think it's quite different now than when I started. I gave it twice this year, probably. I don't know. Dare say Amsterdam and Antwerp, maybe somewhere else. I don't know. Who remembers?
Okay.
But it kind of is about both personal and organizational learning and growth mindset and all sorts of studies about what encourages people to learn, and how you can make sure that people are open to learning and open to new information.
Yeah, it's a great talk. I think it's good for everyone to watch. But I'll my personal experience with it is like I'm like, oh, I'm at a DevOps days. Another talking about how learning's great. Like, but I'm going to watch it anyways. And then right away, it's like, this is finally getting to what I want. I think as I was saying to you somewhere, one of those Benelux places, Sasha, like my problem is I know I need to have habits, but I don't have the habit of forming habits. And like, I think there's several things in that talk that you went over that I think were good ways of defeating that. Like the best, to give one preview, was like, a lot of people say, they get frustrated at learning, or like they're lazy, or they don't want to do anything. And then like, why don't you try sitting down on the couch for like 5 minutes and see how long it takes you to go crazy? Like you need something to do. Like, and if so you can see how that would help boost people into learning that actually you got to do something with your hands.
Yeah, I think, the joke I make is that, growth mindset is like DevOps. Like 10 years ago, the problem was that no one knew what DevOps was. And now the problem is that everyone thinks they know what DevOps is. Yeah. So like growth mindset is the same. Like 10 years ago, if you mention it, people are like, what now? And now they're like, oh yeah, I know what it means. I'm like, can you tell? So we're at time. We'll save it for some other time.
Well, great. Well, thanks for being on here. It's fun as always to talk. I'm sure we'll see each other out this year somewhere. And as always, this has been Software Defined Interviews. If you want to get pointers to the learning talk and other things like that, you can go to softwaredefinedinterviews.com/91 and bring that all up. And we'll see everyone next time. Blah, 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 blah. Bye-bye.
Blah, blah.